Hi everyone. For today's Literacy Friday session, we will be looking at three factors within the school environment that affect literacy learning. One, learning environment. Two, beliefs of the teacher or the teachers, and this includes school administrators as well. And three, teaching style. Now let's look at the learning environment first. Now when we think of learning environment, we generally just think about the physical environment. However, for literacy learning and learning on a whole, we just have to think broadly. When we speak of environment in this sense, we're talking even about the atmosphere, the social context within the school environment. How do people relate to each other, even workers? How do they relate to the children? Now, I know it's hard at times, especially for parents, because you're not on the school compound, but how do you detect whether or not your child's school is actually promoting literacy learning or trying to facilitate it to their best ability? So we're going to look at the physical features, since those are the ones that are more readily identifiable. We can identify those easily by close observation. So let's look at the physical environment. These are some of the things which will show that the school is promoting literacy learning or that the individual teacher is facilitating literacy learning. One, materials that will motivate the children to view or observe, materials that will motivate them to read, materials that will motivate them to write, to listen, to formulate questions, and to speak. We should also see word walls. We should also see content posters and anchor charts. Don't worry, I'm going to explain them. We should be seeing labels. We should be seeing classroom libraries. We should see digital media. There should be areas to read and write, and that's different from the general classroom setup, but it's within the classroom still. And we should be seeing teaching aids that facilitate a multi-sensory approach to learning. We should also be seeing students work. So when we're talking about materials that will motivate the children to view, to observe, to read, to write, to listen, to formulate questions, and to speak, we should see materials that make this environment print rich. Now, if you Google it and just type in print rich environment, it will seem like our typical early childhood setting, the typical setting where you see a lot of charts all over the place. That could be good. It can also be bad, and I will explain why shortly. Now, it's good to have the posters up. But are the posters up because they're connected to what is being taught, or are we just trying to decorate the classroom? That's not what we're going for. We're not just going for decoration. It should be meaningful. So if you want the child to observe, then there must be something to observe because we're trying to facilitate literacy learning here. So it cannot be a plain classroom. Now, when we get to teachers' belief, we will understand why some classrooms seem empty, because there are some teachers who believe that, listen, these charts are only necessary for a particular age group. So they are not mindful of children who are much older, even teenagers, who may be struggling as readers. And sometimes it is that persons would want to put things into the classroom for a teenage child who is reading below grade level, but they don't put age appropriate material. So you have to consider the needs of the student and the level at which a child is at, plus a child's age. So you will not put the same reading materials necessarily in an elementary school that you would put in an early childhood institution. You would not necessarily put the same reading materials. When I said reading materials, I'm talking about not just phonic materials. We're talking about even things that facilitate listening. So you can have audio devices, but what's the purpose of it? Are you just having it there so that the children sing along? Or are these devices actually giving content related to the curriculum? So we have to be mindful of those things. Are these things that the child can just pick up and listen, even if the teacher did not instruct the child to go there? These are things that should be asked, allowing them to formulate questions in their mind. So we would have looked at observation as a part of critical thinking as one of the skills. Is there probably a picture that allows the child to think, to say, what is really happening here in this scene? So we're putting things in the classroom setting or around the school campus that suggests that, listen, these things are here for the children to think about, for them to view it, for them to speak to each other and to teach us about it. But it's all about stimulating the literacy skills. We should also look for word walls. And I'm going to insert an image here as to what a word wall looks like. Sometimes we see teachers having these words and we see, oh, the teacher is just trying to build a list of words. No, it should be related to what was taught during the lessons. And you will isolate certain words, especially sight words. Those are the words that we cannot necessarily sound out to pronounce, but the child needs to learn them. So you will see those words on the wall, and it's supposed to be within the reach of the child for the child to be able to touch them, to practice calling the words. The teacher should be able to see that the child is reading them or struggling to read them too, to offer the reinforcement. So the word wall should not be stuck into a corner where the child cannot reach it or where the teacher cannot view when the child is going to that section. Content posters and anchor charts now. So content posters are posters that are directly related to the subject or the theme that the teacher is looking at. So if the teacher is looking at my body, then there could be a poster that shows the body parts, and the body parts could be labeled or should be labeled. And for anchor charts, it could be separate in a different area of the classroom, or it could be along the walkways, the hallways, and it could show integration. So we're looking at the body parts for this week of our lesson. So outside on the classroom door before the students enter, there could be an anchor chart is there with 2 hands, and the question above could say, how many fingers do I have? How many fingers do I have? And it should be bold so that once the student sees this label with the question says, how many fingers do I have? The student just decides, let me find out what this question is saying or what this is saying. Because the pictures of the hands should be so catchy that they cannot pass that point. They should be seeing the words, but they should be seeing the hands. It could be that the hands are almost the size of their hands and they just want to put their hands there. And naturally, you could have the numbers for each finger. So it could assist the child to count. So it's integrating even the numeracy development. As we remember, computing is a part of literacy development. And it's just a catchy way to put it. Yes. So that would be an anchor chart that's related to the lessons that we're looking at about my body for that theme. Next, we should have labels. Labels come in different forms. So we should see labels with the student's name on their items that they bring from home. We should see labels on their work that is being displayed. We should see labels for things within the classroom environment and things within the wider school environment. So we should see labels that say table, with TABLE on the table. We could see a label on a tree outside. It could say tree. We could see a label on a bench. And I'm deliberately choosing these words because these use up the phonic elements that we are going to want them to actually look at. The ch in bench for the CH, the E in terms of tree for that digraph E. And we label all these things right around the school campus. Next, we should have classroom libraries. Now, there are some teachers who say they have a library, but really it's not a classroom library. It's more than just having books in a corner. So we don't want just a reading corner. it should actually look like this is a comfortable area where students just want to go to read. So it should be appealing. The books should be changed periodically. So it should not be the same books for the entire school year. It should also be books. Books should also be books that cater to the different reading interests. So if you know that some of the students are into action figures, then put some books about action. If some are into science, put some things that allow for discovery in terms of science content. Then you know that you're going to have some who love the fairy tales. So even if you don't believe in fairy tales, it would be good to just put a few of those books in there as well. There should also be reading material within the library that's not necessarily in the form of books, and this incorporates digital media as well. So you can have those read aloud books that allow them to just press and listen and the words could flow on the screen, something like that. But it should be comfy. So in this classroom library, you could have cushions, you can have smaller desks that are separate from the rest of the classroom setting. If you can, it would be good if you have air conditioning, special ventilation, a lovely mat, just to make it a relaxing environment. We should also have an area to read and write. And I know that you will have the general table setting for the classroom. When we're talking about an area to read and write, this is supposed to promote independent reading and independent writing. It can be incorporated in the same library area, very close to that, but we want it to be in such a way where the student has space enough to express their thoughts, space enough to think freely without interruption from others, and space enough for them to actually feel as if this is an area I want to go to. Some teachers make it an incentive, like, listen, if you do this today, you will get a privilege to go on that section of the classroom. So they know it's not an area that they generally go to. It's for special things. Yes, so you make reading and writing seem like, oh, wow, this is so wonderful, and you need to get into that area. Next, so we explained digital media as well. So the few that I mentioned just now, these are things that must be within the general space for the child where they're able to read it. These should not be things that the child cannot touch or the child cannot access easily. So the other two, teaching aids and students' work, these should be visible to the children, but not necessarily within their reach. And we can explain why. Well, I will explain why. So the teaching aids, they should not just be there to say, yes, I am teaching. No, they should also be ones that facilitate a multi-sensory approach to learning. And when I say a multi-sensory approach to learning, to use up all the senses of the child as best as possible through lessons. So we should see things that appeal to the sense of smell, even though we don't think about it so much, the sense of touch. We should see audio content, visual content, all of that. And I know it's not easy to show that the teacher will be using things that appeal to even the sense of taste, but there should be items within the area that suggest that, oh, this teacher might just be offering all that. So you get the children to talk about what they sense through the sense organs as best as possible, and even if they don't want to talk about it, facilitate these things in the lesson for them to experience it all. Hands-on approach to learning is what we're about. There should be the students' work, because this motivates the child. If they see that their work is being recognized and the teacher doesn't just give them work and stuff it in a folder somewhere until the end of the year or until the end of the term, the students will be more motivated to produce work that can go on the wall. They love when their parents see these things. They love when their names go up on the wall. They love to see stars beside their names. They love it.